before we get to all of that, for 8th graders, hopefully you got this sheet of paper that went home. If you didn't, this coming Friday, October 7th, is our annual 8th grade night at the football game, at the high school football game here. And what we do is we invite in the 8th grade band students to come, and actually they should already have, some of them don't. They will very soon have some music to learn with a high school band. They'll come in, they'll sit in the stands with us, they'll march into the stadium with us before the game, sit in the stands and play along, get to know some of the high school students, interact, get to see all the fun that we have on the Friday nights. It's a really great night. And so I'll send to both Mr. C and to Mr. Henderson, I'll send specifics about times that they would need to be here and what to wear and all of that. But we really hope that as many of our 8th grade students as possible can be here for that, because it's just a great time. And so I highly encourage your students to be involved in that. But what we're here to talk about tonight is the Sydney Youth Musicale in Sydney, Australia in the summer of 2013. And so what you've got in front of you right now is a packet that outlines a lot of the specifics of the trip as we know them right now. Some of this will fluctuate a little bit because we're so far out. But basically, before we get into the details of the trip, a little bit of the honor behind this and what we went through, the process we went through to be invited. And there was a bit of an audition process. We had to put together a CD of the high school band playing music from the concert band, because sort of the cornerstone performance that we'll talk about is a concert performance, although we will perform a number of times over there. We put together a CD of several of the songs that the high school concert band had played and a little bit of information about the band. And we had to send that off to the company that basically produces this festival. And then based on that audition CD and the information that we had sent, the conversations that we had had, they therefore invited us to be a part of this. Now, typically, the things that you won't see in here, typically in the Sydney Youth Musicale, they only invite 3 groups, and this is from a worldwide applicant pool. So for 13, unless they reconfigure their festival a little bit, Soddy Daisy High School Band will be one of only 3 groups from who knows where that's invited. As a matter of fact, for this past summer's festival, I don't believe there were any bands from the U.S. And so it's a fairly select pool of groups that get to go, that get invited to go and play. So, having gone through that process, let's talk a little bit about the specifics of the trip. If you look on, the first page is a very poorly photocopied picture of the interior of the Sydney Opera House. The Sydney Opera House, the band will perform inside the Sydney Opera House as part of this festival. And if you're familiar with, if you see any kind of commercial for Australia or anything that deals with Australia, they show you one of 3 things without fail. They show you a kangaroo or a koala bear, or the Sydney Opera House. It's right there on the harbor, and it's the white building with a sort of pointed roof line that looks like cells. It's a world-famous structure, world-famous concert hall. And our high school band will be giving a concert as part of the Youth Music Festival inside the Sydney Opera House. And so that's a really badly copied picture, but of the inside of the Opera House. Flip over to your second page, and let's just kind of talk through the itinerary. Now again, remember, and I'm sure there's a disclaimer in here somewhere that says because we're dealing with, really a year and a half away, that some of these things may get rearranged a little bit. But the highlights and the important stuff of the trip it's all laid out in here, although it may wind up in some slightly different places. Day 1, Sunday, June 23, we depart from Atlanta for, it says Los Angeles, probably Los Angeles, could be San Francisco, but anyway, we depart from Atlanta to the west coast of the U.S., and then we connect to probably a different airline, and then fly from the west coast to Australia. Day 2, Monday, we cross the international date line, so we time travel, and Monday doesn't exist for us. So we leave on Sunday. 24 hours later, it's about 24 hours in the air, believe it or not. We leave on Sunday. 24 hours later, we get there. It's Tuesday. So take a look at day 3, Tuesday, June 25th. Arrive at the Sydney Kingsford Smith Airport this morning. Meet our people, go through customs, passports, and all that. Load our stuff on the coaches, the buses, and we depart the airport for a short drive to this eastern suburb of Sydney and the world-famous Bondi Beach. A little bit of time on the beach there. We'll have a sort of a heavy snack lunch, and then we'll visit the South Heads for a magnificent view of both Sydney and the cliffs of both North and South Heads and the Pacific Ocean. That's if you go and search for that, it's a pretty amazing view from the South Heads there. Continue on to your host school, where you'll be met by your host families for the next 6 nights. After a brief ceremony of welcome, you'll go home with your host family and host students to begin to get to know them and have dinner. Now, if you're an 8th grader, right now your flag's up. You go, "Whoop, time out. What are we talking about?" For the students, and we'll spend plenty of time on this, so don't freak out about it right now. But for the students, this is a homestay program. Now, remember, my disclaimer, at the time you're going to be talking about your almost 10th grader and not your 8th grader, so with that perspective in mind too. And we'll talk a lot more specifically in a second about the homestay program, but it is a homestay program for the students. Day 4, Wednesday, the host family drops your child back off at the school. Your child goes to class. They will go to class and you will be taken by, I'm sorry, I'm not reading that at all right. You come back with your host family. That student goes to school. Our students load onto the buses, and we spend basically that day, a full day of sightseeing in the Sydney area. Some of the things included there, the Rocks, which is a bit of a historic area in Sydney, Darling Harbour, Paddy's Market, Sydney Harbour Cruise, and those things that you can find those online, and all very neat, worthwhile things to do. Return to your host school early this evening to be picked up by your host family for dinner and overnight. Day 5. And this, to me, Day 5 is one of the neatest things about the program. Day 5, depending on the schedule, will either be a full day or a half day in the school with your host student. So part of what we do, a lot of this is built around, with the homestays and with the way this is set up, a lot of cultural exchange opportunities. And so part of it as well is not just all sightseeing, but on this particular day, your child is going to spend the day in school with the host student and sort of shadowing their classes. And it kind of tells you some things on here. They'll shadow through the classes. They'll probably be asked to give a little speech about life in America, about their school in America, and have a chance to interact with the Australian high school students, which I think is just an amazing opportunity to do that. Friday, Day 6, Friday, June 28th. This entire day will be occupied with rehearsal and performance in the Great Hall of the Sydney Opera House. And if you're not familiar with the Sydney Opera House, and take this thing home and go through it and do some internet searches and see what amazing opportunities there are. The Sydney Opera House, as a concert hall, just as a place to go and perform, is known worldwide for its acoustics, for the aesthetics, the way it looks inside, the way it sounds. And the greatest artists and the greatest orchestras in the world go and perform inside the Sydney Opera House. We're very fortunate here that in the spring we typically do our concerts in the Tivoli Theater downtown, not in the gym. But, you know, folks going to Tivoli for the first time and go, wow, look at this. No comparison at all. Spend a little time looking at and learning about the Sydney Opera House, an amazing honor that it is for your children, for our students to be able to give that performance there. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about the performance itself. The inside of the Great Hall in Sydney Opera House, the largest performance space, and there's 3 or 4. But this concert is in the largest performance space, and it seats about 2,600 people. This event has been held for, I think the year that we go, will be the 24th or 25th year. And one of the things in talking to the organizers about it, and one of the things in talking to other school band directors and orchestra directors that have done it, one of the things I wanted to know was, we raise all of this money to go. Are we going to go and sit down on stage in the 2,600 seat Sydney Opera House and play for our 20 parents? And they said, absolutely not. And so here's the thing, this just knocks my socks off. For, I think now the 11th year in a row, there have been at least 2,000 audience members to hear the groups play. And so, I mean, you picture, it's full. The Great Hall of Sydney Opera House is full to hear these school groups from different countries come and play. And so the festival organizers told me that, and I said, yeah, I don't believe that. Because if you don't know me, I'm kind of a cynical person, and I think you're trying to sell this to me, I don't buy it. And they said, well, look, here's people that have done it, call them. And so I spent a lot of time on phones with band and orchestra directors, high school band and orchestra directors that did it. One of the first thing I asked about was the homestay program, which we'll come back to. The second thing I asked every one of them about was, what about the Opera House performance? And they said, you won't believe it. And I said, they tell me that there's 2,000 people there. Is that true? And they said, there's at least 2,000 people there. There's so few empty seats in this hall. And the audience is so receptive to what the students are doing. It's just an amazing thing. So just put your mind around this for a second. For your child to be on stage in one of the greatest concert halls in the world performing